Hello, everybody. David Shuster here. For Americans who like White House press secretaries who are uninformed and idiotic, Karoline Leavitt is the gift that keeps on giving. The 27-year-old is defending the Trump White House for ignoring a federal judge's order.
Our lawyers at the federal government who believe that this injunction is entirely unconstitutional, and it is for anybody who has a basic understanding of the law. You cannot have a low-level district court judge filing an injunction to usurp the executive authority of the President of the United States. That is completely absurd.
Actually, as anybody who has graduated law school knows, you can have a federal court judge filing an injunction to block an executive action. That's why we have three branches of government. It's the judicial branch, the courts, that determine the constitutionality of the actions of any government official. If the executive branch, in this case the Trump White House, doesn't like a court ruling, Trump can appeal it all the way to the Supreme Court. However, for a White House spokesperson to assert that a president can simply defy a court ruling is astounding. Here's legal expert Andrew Weissmann.
The clip of the press secretary saying no judge can do this. I'm sorry, who on God's green earth is she to say that? That's what the courts are for. Pam Bondi said that she's free to criticize the judge in terms of she thinks he's wrong. She is saying that we're appealing it. All of that is fair game.
Right.
But she went further. And she said that he is, by his ruling, supporting terrorists. That is the first line of her statement. That is from the Attorney General of the United States.
That's right. The Attorney General, Pam Bondi, is accusing the federal judge in this dispute of supporting terrorists. And that incendiary claim is on top of White House spokesperson Karoline Leavitt insisting that a federal judge cannot stop a White House. All of this is tied into the recent Trump deportation of more than 250 migrants flown to El Salvador. Trump alleges that most of the migrants were members of a Venezuelan criminal gang and says the rest belonged to another criminal gang called MS-13. U.S. District Judge James Boasberg ordered the deportations halted, only to be told the planes carrying the migrants were mid-flight. Judge Boasberg ordered the Trump administration to then call the aircraft back to the United States, but that order was ignored. The Trump White House justified the deportation by citing a 1798 law. Never mind that this law only applies to wartime.
Just to be clear, on the merits of this, Judge Boasberg on the Alien Enemies Act has substantial grounds to support what he did. That's very much going to get into the weeds. But let's just say, even if you thought reasonable minds could differ, who says because you've said the government doesn't have a statutory basis to do something and you say you can't do it, that means that you are siding with terrorists? And by the way, they have not been determined to be terrorists. As you noted at the outset, there's been no hearing on that. And of all people to be understanding of defendants' rights and the right to a hearing, and that you shouldn't take executive action as being the end-all and be-all, it should be defendant Donald Trump. He was a defendant in 4 criminal cases. If there's anybody who should know and understand and respect due process of law, it should be him, because he was himself protected by it.
Now, back to Karoline Leavitt at the Trump White House. On top of the Trump press secretary not knowing basic constitutional law and showing remarkable ignorance about the fundamental pillars of our government, Leavitt also doesn't seem to understand cause and effect and the problem of comparing apples and oranges. You know, the stuff that most people learn in elementary school. Watch.
I was appalled by the statistic when I saw it this morning. In 1 month, in February, there have been 15 injunctions of this administration in our agenda. In 3 years under the Biden administration, there were 14 injunctions. So it's very clear that there are judicial activists throughout our judicial branch who are trying to block this president's executive authority. We are going to fight back.
Or it's very clear that the Trump administration actions violated the Constitution a lot more than the actions of the Biden administration. Again, if any president doesn't like a federal judge's ruling, that president, that administration is free to appeal and take their arguments all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. However, as several analysts have noted, if an administration is not optimistic about the ultimate outcome in the appellate courts, well, that administration might be tempted to ignore a judge's ruling from the start. And that seems to be what is happening with the Trump administration. Perhaps the Trump White House knows that even the U.S. Supreme Court will declare the deportations without due process to be unconstitutional. So the Trump White House is just doing whatever Donald Trump wants from the beginning and ignoring the courts. It is increasingly hard, though, to ignore the gaffes and whoppers coming from White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt. At a White House press briefing, she was asked about the prospect of Donald Trump seeking retribution against the Select House Committee that investigated the January 6th riot.
Is it the president's belief that the Justice Department should be investigating members of the January 6th Select Committee? Is he directing the DOJ to do that?
As the president made it very clear in his address on Friday, I believe some of you were there, I was there, he made his vision for what he would like to see of the Department of Justice very clear, but he said that he has appointed great people in Attorney General Pam Bondi and also in our FBI Director Kash Patel to do what they think is best for our justice system and to stop the weaponization of justice that we saw under the previous administration against not just President Trump but his supporters as well. We want to restore the Department of Justice to an institution that focuses on fighting law and order and crime.
Trump wants the Department of Justice to fight law and order. Most people want to defend law and order, but Karoline Leavitt, in her robotic and oftentimes flailing style, has it the other way. Whatever. She is entitled to make some verbal gaffes. It happens. The larger problem is when a member of a White House deliberately and hideously stomps on basic constitutional law. I have a feeling that Karoline Leavitt knows better. Then again, maybe she doesn't and is just willfully ignorant. Either way, it's embarrassing to anybody who thinks a White House should have people who are the best and the brightest instead of staff who are ignorant and uninformed. By the way, Donald Trump keeps melting down as his trade war backfires.
They don't take our agriculture, we take their agriculture. It's like a one-way street with them. The European Union is very, very nasty. They treat us very badly. China obviously treats us very badly.
Check out that video at the link below. I'm David Shuster. Thanks for joining us.